Julie Pearson, Little Thunder. Today is January 6th, 2011, and I'm interviewing Robby McMurtry for the Oklahoma Native Artists Project, sponsored by Oklahoma Oral History Project at OSU. We're here at Robby's home in Morris. Robby, you're a storyteller who creates colorful characters in painting and print, and also an educator.
Actually, I was born in San Antonio, Texas, but I grew up in Loco, Oklahoma. That's the first place I remember. Loco, Oklahoma was a very rural area, and it had a tiny school. And the school was so tiny we had to go to school somewhere else, actually. The Loco was where we got our mail and did our shopping and everything. And it's still exists. It's probably maybe 200 people there, I think. But it was as rural as you can get in Oklahoma, probably. Mostly ranches. That was the main economy around there, was ranching and little farming. Not much farming because it was too dry. But
is that what your father did for a living? Was he a
rancher? My father tried to be a farmer and a rancher. He kind of played at it, but mainly he was a veteran of the Army, and he was in service for a long time. And we periodically, over about 12 or 14 years, would move away from Loco to some Army base in California or Germany or anywhere, and then move back to Loco. Go somewhere else again.
So you're kind of an Army brat.
Yeah.
What about your grandparents? Were they close by, or did they play a role in your life?
My mother's parents were close by, and they were hard scrabble farmers. They tried to farm and whatever they could. And I loved my grandparents, but going to visit them was always work, because it was always they always growing gardens and fixing fence and stuff. But I like to go and listen to them talk at night. They both told stories about how they had come to Oklahoma as children, and that was really interesting to me. And my other grandmother lived in Duncan. That's my father's mother, and she was a very strange, spooky old woman that we would go to see. And
now was that on your Comanche?
Right.
Comanche
yeah.
Side of the family.
And she was a little bit scary to me, but really interesting, because when she would talk, I would listen too. And unfortunately, she passed away when I was, I think, 9, and left me $33.
That was probably a good sum for her. What kinds of art experiences did you have in school?
Very little. There was no art at the school, actually, where I went to school, public school, in which was Valmy. There was no real art program. Occasionally I'd see an artist who would do a show in Duncan or somewhere like that. And really, as far as I knew, when I was a kid, I was the only artist there was, around.
Did you think of yourself as an artist as a child?
Yeah, that's all I really, thought I could do. That was my thing. I wasn't big enough to play football, and we lived too far from town to do any activities anyway. It was 20 miles. I rode on a school bus, an hour every morning and every afternoon, and I did a lot of drawing on the school bus.
Did you have access to materials, or did you have to kind of?
Yeah, I could always scrounge paper and a pencil. That was the main thing. Yeah, and when I got a little older at school, I discovered typing paper without lines, and that was great for drawing. And I did gravitate to another guy, a Cherokee guy who went to our school. He became like my best friend. He was the only other artist that was around, and we would work on each other's drawings and go camping together. And it's just like he was my buddy.
Did cartoons play a role in your interest in art?
They did. I was a comic book aficionado when I was a kid, before it was even existed. At the Army bases, we had no TV most of the time, even when we were at Loco. So entertainment was the radio or the funny papers or comic books if I could get them. But I could only get comic books in Duncan, and that was a 40-minute, trip from the house. And so comic books to me, I would read them over and over and just look at the stories. And at the same time I was doing this, I was listening to older people talk about stories, things that would happen. But I would imagine the pictures as they were telling these, stories. I would imagine the things that they were telling me in a comic book. It seemed like the same kind of stories. And I learned to draw from comic books more than anything else. Some friends showed me different things, and I found a couple of books when I was in high school, but basically I taught myself just by looking and copying other people.
What was your first exposure to Indian culture?
Indian culture around Loco, it's the edge of Comanche Country. There were some Comanches living there, but they were rodeo people. They really weren't powwow people. And there were other tribes too, Choctaws, and because it's Choctaw and Chickasaw country also. And so really, I knew there were powwows, because they had those in Comanche and Duncan and different places, but I really wasn't aware that there was an Indian culture per se until I got away from the house, till I got out and saw it.
Right, in college.
There were a lot of people around, but they weren't like a community of a certain group.
And because your access to art was limited, you probably didn't see much Indian art.
No.
Growing up.
No. Occasionally there would be something in Duncan or Comanche, an artist would have a show at a drugstore or something, trading post, and I'd go see that if I could get over there. And I remember when I was in high school, some of the banks had Indian art shows, and those were really, because those seemed really classy, and that's where I first started seeing a lot of different styles of Indian art specifically.
Were you kind of interested in that as a subject matter?
Oh yeah. It it seemed like stuff that had happened right there where I was living. I mean, when I would ride the school bus, I remember I would look out and just, the other kids would be talking and playing and laughing, but I would just be watching the country, just imagining what was going on out there in that field or on that prairie, over there under that mountain off in the distance. There was a mountain called Hat Top Mountain that could be seen for 30 miles. Well, I guess it can still be seen. And just imagining people, in that landscape doing things, living, whatever they were doing, cattle drives or buffalo hunts or.
You went to college in Chickasha.
Yes.
What did you major in?
I tried to major in art, but I flunked out as an art major.
And why was that?
Because although he was a wonderful artist and he could do really interesting stuff, I just couldn't discipline myself to spending a semester painting a couple of still lifes. And the first still life I really did turned out not to have the proper things in it. There was a package of cigarettes in it and some other things, and that all sounds real passe now. That's the kind of stuff you see in still lifes now. But then and I got bad grades in art. I was flunking out as an art major, getting D's and F's, and I know a lot of it was my fault too, because I just didn't want to do that stuff.
Weren't interested in doing that stuff.
I loved figure drawing. I got really good grades in figure drawing, but every other class I just bombed. So I changed. My friend up there was a poet named Lance Henson, and he said, "Man, get your degree in English." And he was working on his degree at the same time, and I thought, well, okay, all right, we can go to class together. And as I got into it, I found, well, I can use this to learn how to write stories, these stories I've been wanting to tell. I've been wanting to paint them, and now I can write them and tell about them. So it just started all kind of coming together. I was painting. I painted after I graduated. Well, during college even, I started painting and selling a few pieces.
And were they Indian paintings?
Mostly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of Western stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
I did that for a number of years, but I've always wanted to do something like comic books, tell stories and graphically, you know, which my paintings really are. If you look at them, they tell like mini stories or little tiny episodes, but I wanted a longer narrative, something more epic, I guess.
Well, and Lance is a Cheyenne poet, and I think he is part of the reason why you ended up sort of a play that you had co-written with Linda Pula called Skins ended up being produced in Tulsa.
Yes. When I was in college there in Chickasha, that was when I really first discovered an Indian community, and fortunately or unfortunately, they were mostly Kiowas. But we had an Indian club, and we put on powwows around and stuff. And Linda Pula was in an English class with me, and the assignment was to write a play. It was called a playwriting class. You know, he was going to show us the form, so we just decided to collaborate on the idea. So she would come over to my house in the evening, or I'd go to her house, and we would write or not. Basically it was the story was called, I can't remember what the story was. What was it called?
Well, the name of the play was Skins.
Skins, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was about some local Indian guys trying to go to college, and it was performed there at the college, several performances, and then it traveled to Anadarko and Anaplotin, and a couple of years later it was made into a production in Tulsa.
In Tulsa, where
didn't get very good reviews.
but it was part of one of the first Native plays.
Yeah,
Native
it was done in a big
in Tulsa.
garage at the Tulsa Indian Youth Council. A big garage with we brought in bleachers and did it.
Were you selling your artwork when you were in college too?
A little bit, yeah. Anadarko was right there close by, and there were several
gift shops
and trading posts, and there were real trading posts in those days. I mean, I'm not trying to sound like I'm really an old guy, but there were trading posts around that had been there for 50 or 60 years, and they were still, and a lot of pawn shops too. You could, there used to be a lot of pawn shops. I don't know if there still are or not.
What were some of the competitive shows that you did fairly early on?
Just local art shows, like Duncan. I did the.
Did you show at Indian Fair?
I showed at Indian Fair a few times, yeah. Later on, when I met some other artists who were older and more professional, I started going to art shows with them away. I went with Leonard Riddles to a lot of places, and Leonard and Doc and I all went together sometimes to Tulsa and different places around the state. I think we went down to Texas once or twice. And
how did you meet Leonard? And he was a pretty important Indian artist.
Leonard is a very distant relative, and I'm not sure exactly how, but my dad told me about him. And he lived at Walters, which was a good hour and a half away from Duncan. And later, when I got a car, I started. Well, and Leonard came to church in Duncan, so I met him over there, and he started inviting me down to his house. And he lived way out on just the bald, unmarked prairie, and it was so easy to get lost out there. There were no landmarks whatsoever, none.
Did you show him your work and
oh yeah,
looked at his work?
Yeah.
Do you think he influenced you in any way?
Oh yeah, a lot. Leonard loved to tell stories. He would sit up all night long till 2 or 3 a.m. And just tell stories and things that he'd heard. And he was just a font of because he'd started gathering stuff too when he was a kid. Started drawing when he was a teenager, and he talked to the old people.
Right, a lot of cultural information.
Yeah, right, yeah. And and he just knew a lot of, I want to say archaic knowledge about Comanches, things that I think really nobody else knows about, probably. And there were some things that he wouldn't even talk about at all, but I knew he knew about them. He just wouldn't say. Yeah.
How did you end up in the Stillwater area? You were hanging out in, basically, I guess, after Chickasha.
I had a girlfriend up there. I started going up there, and once I got up there, I found out that there were a bunch of people I knew that were up there from Loco and Chickasha and Anadarko, and so I started hanging out at Stillwater some, and I knew Ben Harju up there, of course, and
so there was kind of a little arts community.
Yeah. And then right after I graduated from college, though, my friend John West said, "Come to Tulsa." I said, "Okay." So I went up there, and when I got up there to stay with him, he said, "I'm going back to college." He said, "Do you want my job?" And he was a janitor at the Tulsa Indian Youth Council, and I was broke, and I said, "Okay." So I took his job and working down there. But after a while down there, the people that I was working with, they'd seen my drawings laying around and different things, and they started asking me to work in the youth program, which was arts and culture, and so I was given a job there at the Indian Youth Council.
That was your first art teaching experiences, I guess.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah. Well, in college, I had done some volunteer work, like at places like Hog Creek and
Wow.
Fort Cobb, and just with a group of kids, just for one or two evenings. But up there, it became a real job, and I enjoyed it. And I was also doing other things, driving the bus, and Ben was working there too. He was the cultural director, but he also ended up being the maintenance man and the mechanic and everything too. So it was a real small staff.
Yeah. So did you and Ben get hooked up with the art market about the same time, or?
Yes, Ben had met her and told me to come down, and this was after we both lost our jobs
At Tulsa Indian Youth Council.
Yeah, I had invited Ben to be in a show with me, a two-man show in Tulsa at a little gallery.
Do you remember the name?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And then shortly after that, we both lost our jobs for the same reasons, basically. I won't go into that.
What was the year?
1976.
Okay.
I'm thinking.
Thank you.
I think it was the same year I got married. Yeah, and he had met the people in the art market, and he invited me to come down and meet them, and that's how I met Linda Griever. And at the time, her art market was more or less art of stuff to put up over your couch, stuff to match your furniture and it was a lot of Eastern and European things. No local flavor stuff at all. It was just completely generic gallery. It could have been anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, I guess.
Right, because she had inherited that body of work. And
I didn't realize that.
Yes, and so
okay.
The Indian artists that she handled really were the
Ben was the first one that she handled, I think.
They were the reason she switched over.
Yeah, I think Ben really kind of turned her on to that. Mm-hmm. Turned her on in. Never mind.
A lot of that. So how did you meet Lisa?
I was a counselor at the Tulsa Indian Youth Council. I was doing classes and counseling kids and whatever, and she came in with Annette Arkikita, who was a girl that I was working with, and who did a lot of things around the Arts Council.
Right.
I mean the Youth Council, and she was they went to school together, and they came in one day, and I said, "Oh my God, who's that?"
So you met in Tulsa. You met your wife in Tulsa.
But strangely, from Duncan, my wife had just moved up here from Duncan.
But you didn't know each other.
We didn't know each other there, but we knew some people there very well. We knew some of the same people.
That's interesting. A large vein of your work has focused around period representations, like of cowboys and Indians, like from the 50s. Am I kind of right about that, the era, the 50s? Did you settle on that subject pretty early in your career, or did it evolve gradually? I mean, my son had called you the Pepsi Cola guy because
right?
you used to do the old-fashioned.
I don't know.
Pepsi.
I guess maybe that's kind of a little
Signs,
bit Andy Warhol stuff. Maybe that came to me when I was in college, or I don't know.
Uh-huh.
But that's the icons that I remember as a child, and from the 50s, and 60s.
Right. Doc Tate Navacoya, who was another Comanche artist, gave you the name Aquasu.
Ekakwasu.
Ekakwasu,
Yeah.
thank you. And
spelled
you
it
signed, okay. And you signed your paintings that way for a little while. Can you explain how that came about?
I was having dinner at Doc's house one evening. I think it was dinner. Anyway, we were sitting on the table, and he just started calling me that. And it means red shirt. I had on a red shirt. He knew my name, but he just kept calling me that. I guess it caught his eye or something. And I kind of liked it, so I started putting on my paintings for a while. And then people started calling me that too, the people who knew what it meant. Of course, to most people it'd be meaningless, it's just a jawbreaker that I could say it means anything, and who would know except a Comanche.
Is that kind of why you dropped it eventually?
Yeah, it was an identity thing. People didn't recognize me, and it was hard to sign my checks, Ekakwasu.
How did Doc influence you as an artist, either in terms of business or style? Or
Doc talked about business a lot. He talked about how he felt a person should. He told me on more than one occasion. He said, Robby, if you're going to be an artist, you got to have a gimmick. And right away I saw well, he's a flute player, and he was an excellent flute player. He may have been a better flute player than he was an artist, And I thought, well, that's pretty neat, yeah. So that's when I started I think that's really when I started using the logos, the Coca-Cola.
So something that would make you stand out.
Yeah, something that would cut me out from the rest of the herd a little bit.
Right.
Plus, I was doing more contemporary stuff, and almost nobody was doing that. It was scenes from 1850, or something like that.
At that point, had you seen some of T.C. Cannon's work? Or,
I had not.
Frank, is it the guy who does the Coyotes? Indian artist.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. So you had.
I had not, but
wow.
When I saw it,
That's interesting.
When I saw T.C. Cannon's work, it just.
There's a lot of overlap there. A little.
I blossomed when I saw that because he had even more ideas.
Right. And had permission to push that envelope. What were some of when you first started showing along with Ben and some of the other artists in some of the Indian art galleries, how was your work received? What was the landscape like?
Wow. At that time, there were a lot of local trade, they called them trade fairs. And they were being done by a lot of local municipalities. And that was the art scene in those days. It was pretty busy. You could go to one every month or even more often in the summertime. If you
were
wanted
they like
to
in
go.
the public square? Or?
There were usually, and sometimes they'd be in a shopping center or they were starting to build some malls then. That's when malls were starting to be built.
Birth of the malls.
And they were in the new malls. Yeah, that was like one of the big things for the new malls. And you could drive to Oklahoma City and Tulsa and go to big ones, and there were small ones too, in Duncan and Lawton and Comanche, different places.
Were you making enough money to kind of get by?
Yeah, it was a big help. It really was. I was still a student.
Along with the galleries. So. Oh, I see. Right.
No, when the gallery scene started, really, the trade fairs just kind of went away, I guess. Maybe they still do them. There are only a few big ones now, just really huge ones, Red Earth and different things like that.
When did you begin teaching at Morris? How long have you?
After I left the Tulsa Indian Youth Council, I went to work for the Cherokee Nation as an artist in residence. But actually it was through the State Arts Council. They were doing half the funding and sending artists to different sites, and I was sent to the Cherokee Nation. And I'm sorry, what was the question?
So when you began teaching at Morris, but just sort of your teaching career, because I'm interested in.
Tribal politics being what they are, I came back from vacation one summer and my whole department had been dismembered or however you want to say it.
How long had you been there?
2 years. And so the Arts Council said, well, if you want to go to Morris, you can. Check it out. So I came down here and looked at it. It seemed like a nice community. It's very small, not a whole lot bigger than Loco. And so I was an artist in residence here. And when that ended, I was hired as the cultural coordinator through the Creek Nation to take care of the cultural aspects of the
Indian education,
which was kind of strange because I didn't speak any Creek and I didn't particularly know their history, but what I've learned I've really studied it, and it's been a lot of fun. Probably 80% of the kids here are Creek,
right?
And a smattering of every other tribe too. My best student this year is a Kiowa kid.
Wow. How have your experiences teaching informed your art?
Well, I like to tell stories in my art, and the kids pick up on that. Younger people have a real hard time with a lot of fine art, what we call fine art, because it just doesn't speak to them. A lot of stuff that they see in museums and in art books, it's as far removed from anything that they know, as it can be. And why do we have to learn this crap, What's this all about? What's so great about the Mona Lisa? And I understand that the Mona Lisa is great. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that that I think they're trying to, the education community is a little bit snobby about stuff like that, and they should, kids can learn more about that stuff when they go into college if they're interested in it, but it's just pretty much useless at public school level, I think. I mean, there are a few kids who get it, but most of them don't and don't want to.
Has it helped bringing your own things into the schoolroom? And you're thinking about your graphic knowledge?
Yeah, that always. Mainly, I think, because the kids see that I know what I'm talking about. Well, if you're an art teacher and the kids don't even know if you can draw or throw a pot or anything, why should they listen to you? You're just going to give them assignments in books and show them how to do weavings and things. But I draw. That's one thing I kind of do get a little trouble about from the public school thing, is that I'm expected to do a lot of stuff. And I can't weave, I can't throw a pot, I can't do any of that stuff. I can do a little bit of braiding, and mostly I draw. Mm-hmm. That's all we do. And if you can find what a kid is interested in drawing, that's what's going to hook them, you know.
You can light that spark. When did you first try your hand at writing and illustrating stories? Your own stories?
Oh gosh, in first grade. I swear. I remember my teacher, my first grade teacher, she made a big deal out of it because I would turn all my worksheets over, all my coloring sheets and whatever she gave, I would turn them over and I would divide the paper into 4, pictures, and I would draw a little.
Like panels,
yeah,
comic book panels.
Right. And at the time I was doing Zorro. And she called my mom, to come visit with her about it and everything. And I remember.
So she saw it.
She saw the
Was
Zorro.
she just upset, or did she see
No,
the
no,
talent?
she
Okay.
thought it was great.
Yeah.
She encouraged me to do some more of it, and then we moved again, and
Yeah, sort of lost a mentor there, or supporter. In 2003, I think that's when you published a Song of Moon Pony. Can you explain what that book's about and how you got the idea for it?
Song of Moon Pony was a story I got from Leonard Riddles. And the basic story, I edited it.
It's a traditional
right.
Comanche story.
Yeah, and Leonard had written several books already. He had them typed and everything. Even had mimeograph copies made of them. He didn't there weren't none of them were on computer, and I've often wondered what happened to all that stuff, because he had a lot of it that he had compiled himself.
Right.
He was writing at least one book, I know.
Wow.
But it was never published. So, but he told me that story among one of many, and years later I just decided that would make a good children's book. So I thought it was a beautiful story. Even before I did it as a children's book, though, I'd been telling it as a story, to my kids and grandkids and school kids for years.
Right. There's so many things in there they can relate to, like,
Mm-hmm.
Not feeling attractive, or like they'll never get the girl or guy that
Yes,
they're
I think
interested
so.
in.
Yeah. It's a real story about real people.
What role has Lisa played in helping you kind of juggle your teaching and your artistic career?
Lisa's been very supportive. That's what I was supposed to say. No, she really has. She doesn't go with me to art shows anymore because it's just so exhausting. And I don't even go to art shows much anymore. If I can get out of it, I'd rather just stay home and do my art, Lisa and I eloped and ran away about 3 days after she graduated from high school. And she's been with me ever since, making a place for me to do what I do.
That's neat. That's neat.
She's supporting me right now.
The last, I think it's been 15 years or so. Anyway, you've been exhibiting and lecturing abroad for a number of years in places like Luxembourg and Portugal and Austria. How has that impacted your work?
Lance Henson, my friend from college,
Right.
called me one time and asked me if I would be interested in doing something. It had nothing to do with art. He asked me if I would be interested in lecturing in Luxembourg and the trip to Europe, and I said sure, And I'd never really lectured before except kids, and went and did it. And when I was there, I started seeing the European art scene, and the European art scene is comic books. It's graphic novels, and they've developed it. And they're, when you go into a person's home, where we have, some people in this country have shelves of books, they have shelves of graphic novels that the adults read. And they're great stories. Their best writers, their best storytellers, their best artists work on them. And in America, comic books are still for kids.
Kind of looked down on. Yeah. That's a great point.
I have to hide my comic books, or people make fun of me. But that's why I first decided that I really wanted to get back to that. That's what I'd always really wanted to do. I just had put it aside, and I want to do graphic novels and comics and tell stories about Oklahoma, about the place that I know, you know, where I grew up, and the people, or the descendants of the people that I know.
You did a sculpture in conjunction with, it was a sculpture of a stickball player for
7
project in
stickball players.
Tennessee.
Yeah.
Oh, 7.
7.
Okay.
That was a story also. I got with a group called Gadoogie. Well, we actually formed a group. I formed a group with them of some Cherokee artists, and we did a project in Chattanooga, Tennessee, on the river. And I designed and built and installed 7 stickball players who were coming down from the Pleiades, which is a Cherokee origination story, that they originated in the Pleiades. And there were 7 stickball players coming down. And the entire thing is, I think, 180 feet long. Wow. And the stickball players are about 12 or 14 feet high.
So did you know what Bill was doing? Did each of the artists sort of know what the other artists were contributing and kind of work together design-wise?
A little bit, but the exhibits themselves are separate.
I see.
You see mine as you're coming down the river, or if you're going over the overpass. You can see it from a mile away easily. And Bill's is around the corner, and as the plaza goes up into the town and past a waterfall. It's really a beautiful sight. It covers about 5 acres, I think, right on the Tennessee River there. And steamboats come down and look at it every day, and people in downtown can walk down into it if they want to. It's part of the National Park Service, so it's well maintained.
I hope I get to see it at some point.
There's a young fellow over near Locust Grove named Roy Boney who's doing graphic novels. I've met him a couple times. As far as I know, there's nobody else doing stuff about Oklahoma per se, or about regional. There were some books done by a guy named Jack Jackson down in Texas a few years ago that were more or less focused on Texas history. He did one about Quanah Parker. He did one about the Alamo, the Texas Rangers, different things. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of where I'm headed with my books right now, is doing some of the stories of Oklahoma. But I'm trying to find stories. I'm definitely not going to do one about Will Rogers. Okay? Just get that out of your head. But I'm wanting to find some people, do some books about people, and I'm trying to research them. I'm trying to make them as accurate as I can. The problem with Oklahoma was, it being Indian territory, there were no newspapers. So records are sparse, and when they exist, they're usually federal or tribal, and tribal records are mostly lost. Federal records are difficult to find. They may be filed somewhere in the Smithsonian, but so I'm wanting to do stories about the people of Oklahoma that people have heard about, but maybe don't know what did they do. You know, who was Jesse Chisholm? Oh yeah, the Chisholm Trail. That's all they know about him. You know, and Jesse Chisholm never dealt cattle.
He was an Indian guy.
Yeah, and he was an Indian. And Ned Christi. Everybody's heard of him, but exactly what did he do and what happened? Why was he an outlaw?
Right, and I want to pick up on that in a bit. In 1990, the Indian Arts and Crafts Act was passed, and it required that artists provide, proof of enrollment or be certified by their tribe. Do you remember how that impacted galleries and artists?
It was a kind of a strange scene for a while. There was some anger and resentment and jealousy, and a lot of emotions came into play at that time, and nobody was exempt from it.
Yeah, in other words, no matter how long you'd been identifying Indian or showing.
Right.
doing Indian art or showing?
It didn't really impact it at all until the galleries decided that they needed to make sure they were compliant with the law, and now most of the exhibits and shows are specifically compliant with the law. They may not mention it anymore, but they try to be that. At that time, because we were not enrolled, my dad and I went to the Comanche Tribal Council and got a letter that more or less certified me, I guess. It's never been tested in court, but it sufficed for, you know, when I've needed it a couple of times. People don't like to talk about it. Nobody likes to talk about it and dwell on it. It just it makes everybody uncomfortable.
Right. And yet it's an important part of the conditions that produce an Indian art these days.
As you said, a lot of Indians resent the law because nobody else has to prove that they're black or that they're white or that they're Irish or whatsoever. What does it mean? You know, it's supposed to be a protection, but at the same time, it's another burden.
What is your primary medium when you paint?
Acrylic, but I'm no longer a painter. I'm really pretty much decided I'm not painting anymore. I'm doing my graphic novels. That's what I'm doing, and I'll do a painting or a colored picture for the covers. But something that's interesting and that might be in the future, graphic novels can be done in full color as paintings, and I saw a lot of that kind of thing when I was in Europe. Each panel was a small piece of artwork that was painted, and that's a possibility.
So you might reconsider.
Yeah.
When was the last painting that you did?
Oh, well, actually, I'm working on one for my wife right now. It's a belated Christmas present.
Okay, those are the best kind.
Yes.
How do you think just thinking in terms of your paintings for a minute, because we will come back to your graphic novels, but how do you think your style changed over the years? Maybe your style and your use of color, your palette.
When I first started painting, and all artists do this, I see it all the time, I was trying to paint exactly like somebody whose work I admired. And it was different people at different times. I tried to paint like Leonard for a while. I tried to paint like Rance Hood for a long time.
Oh.
But I discovered that nobody but Rance Hood can paint Rance Hood.
Was that kind of an inspiration for some of your action? Because you do a lot of action paintings, the galloping horses.
Right.
But those are kind of...
but I did a show in New York of some of my big bright action pictures at one time. And the reviewer kept accusing me of copying Frederick Remington's style. And no, I'm trying to copy someone else.
Right. Do you work from photographs?
I work from photographs, yes. When I'm painting, I do that a lot. I do some paintings that are specifically to look like a painted photographic image. And I have a very good friend named Sam Devaney. He's not the official tribal historian, but he's the one everyone goes to when they want to know something visually, because he has recorded and been collecting photographs of Comanches for 40 or 50 years. And,
so you have access to some of those photographs.
Right. He's a genealogist too, so he knows who everybody in every photograph is and how they're related to each other.
Wow.
And he also is a linguist, and he does whenever you hear Comanche spoken in a Hollywood production, you're pretty sure that Sam coached the speakers. Yeah.
You've always done a lot of pen and ink drawings, and long before I think you decided you were going to do although you were always interested in the graphic novel, I've always thought of you too in terms of those pen and inks. What do you like about that medium?
The pen and ink?
Mm-hmm.
It just seems to serve my purpose as a storytelling medium. It's quick. I can do a lot of gestures and movement in it. It seems like it's more free than painting. And I can just I can sit down with a pencil and rough it out, and then go back with a pen and refine it somewhat and catch what I'm trying to put down without spending a whole lot of time on it.
What's your creative process?
Hmm.
Kind of from the inception, how you get ideas.
Well, I like to spend a lot of time outdoors, playing. If you want to know, I have horses. I like to put a saddle on a horse and go for a ride, and pretend that I'm Pistol Pete or Ned Christi or Jesse Chisholm or somebody, or somebody a long time ago riding across the reservation, going to see his girlfriend. Anything, to get me out of this technological world that we're in, that we're also caught up in. Everybody, me too. I mean, and it's smothering me sometimes. I don't know, it smothers everybody else, even if they don't know it. And I hope when I draw a picture of some people sleeping out on the ground or around a campfire or tending their horses, that it looks like I know what I'm talking about. I didn't get this from a book, or you know what I'm saying?
Right. Your artist bio, I love that you have in there that you were raised by coyotes.
That's not strictly true.
And coyote really is was for a period a dominant motif in your work.
Yeah, and he still is. He shows up in some of my books. You have to look for him. Sometimes he's hidden in the background a little bit.
What do you find intriguing about the
coyotes? I've known them since I was a little kid. I remember when I couldn't even talk yet, coyotes were there. We would see them crossing the road or out in the pasture or something. Saw dead coyotes hung on the fence posts. I don't know, I've always just thought they were... Coyote is just everybody else. I mean, he's just trying to get by.
Right. So a survivor.
Right, yeah.
Another aspect of your work is the way it expresses sexuality. It's not in a realistic way, but in a kind of exaggerated DC comic way.
Really?
This is my kind of take on it, and especially your Indian women characters. I was just wondering if you ever caught any flack about that initially when you first started showing.
Once or twice. So I believe it or not, I toned it down. It was a lot more in your face, and my women, all the women that I do are pretty sensual. There was an artist named Frank Frazetta whose work I really admired. He was a comic strip artist, but he was a great anatomist.
Right.
And his women and his men are not thin. They're husky and voluptuous.
Kind of that archetypal, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Super,
I was offered a job
feminine.
with about 3 or 4 years ago with a comic book company out of California, and it wasn't until I talked to them more about it that it turned out to be a pornographic line of graphic novels that they wanted me to draw for. But I turned it down because I would have ended up in therapy or something probably.
I think we've kind of touched on this, but maybe you can expand it a little bit more. Your paintings do have a narrative thread. Are you always conscious of picking up a particular moment, for example, out of a chain of events, and you're painting that particular moment, or do you sometimes just see the image and then the story kind of forms around it? Or is it both?
Yeah, it's just like a snapshot, and then I'd imagine what happened before and what happens after. And that's how my books go too. When I'm doing the book, I'll get an idea or I'll hear about a character, and I just know one snippet of information about him, so I just start to research him as much as I can and interview people and go to places where he went. I try to do that. If I know where something happened, I want to go there and see the place and walk around on it.
It's neat. I remember seeing a lot of night scenes in your paintings that I always thought were striking. Are there any special challenges in those?
I like to do the dramatic moonlight and the highlights and stuff. I really admire that kind of thing in N.C. Wyeth's work and some of the older illustrators. Just very dramatic contrasts.
And magical.
Right, yeah. And I like to go riding at night. Especially if the moon is full or almost full, it's just a magical time. I see things that later I don't know if I really saw or not, but I saw.
As someone who's a practicing artist, how do you think, and I guess maybe you've addressed this, that your approach is different from teachers, art teachers who are not practicing? You're tuned into the students and what you think they will relate to.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm kind of wondering too if when you find that student that has that spark, or they say they want to become professional artists, how do you guide them, or what do you tell them?
I tell my students over and over, the ones who want to listen, if you want to be an artist, you just do art, and don't throw your drawings away because you don't like them. Keep everything you do so you can look at it and see what you feel like you did wrong, and you'll improve if you just keep doing it. Everybody has different natural abilities, but everybody can develop somewhat. I don't think I had any natural ability at drawing, really, but I think I wanted to do it so much. I knew people in high school really who could draw better than I could. I felt like they were much better drawers, but they didn't keep doing it, didn't develop it.
They weren't motivated to stick with it. Yeah. One of your most recent graphic novels is based on Ned Christi, and I wondered if you could explain a bit who Ned Christi is and how you got interested in his story.
Ned Christi was a Cherokee guy from over near Stillwell in a place called Rabbit Trap, which is a little town that's still there. He was accused of killing a deputy marshal in 1887, I think it was. And he, thereafter he was a fugitive for 5 years. Although he really was not on the run, he just went home and he held off United States Marshals and reward seekers who came to get him for 5 years. Built a little castle on a hill over there, and I believe it's been pretty well established now that he was an innocent man. He kept telling people he was innocent. He didn't do it, and I think it's been pretty well proven now that he didn't do what he was accused of doing. But he was one of those guys that went to town and got drunk one night, and bad stuff happened, and he was around there.
Mm-hmm. What kind of reception has the book had so far?
The book was real well received by the family. The family loved it. In fact, I was invited to the Christi family reunion this past summer.
Cool.
To go. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a hog fry.
Oh.
And it was right
Lucky.
there in the vicinity where the entire Ned Christi story took place. It was half a mile from where all the shootouts were. All the shootouts were at Ned Christi's house, because that's where all the lawmen went. And you could see the place from where the event was. And the book is just now getting out into some of the Cherokee place of business, because everything the Cherokees sell has to be vetted. Some historians has to go through it and make sure it's on the mark and accurate, and that just happened this past summer.
It sounds like kind of one of the challenges in terms of doing graphic novels has been marketing, just kind of getting it out
Yeah, it
there.
is. It's totally different from marketing individual pieces of art at an art show. It's trying to find the retailers and so forth, because the more books I move, the more money I make.
Right, right. Do you think it's harder to get publicity for a graphic novel that has an Indian hero?
A little bit, yes. Yeah, I've had a couple of reviews from online people though that have helped, who have, Indian sites or Native American sites. I've had really good reception in libraries. Whenever I've done a library lecture or signing, that's when I get the best response. Bookstores, not so much. People don't even come to them really. And I'm just looking for new markets, new ways to get it out. I would love to do one, that would be used in public schools to teach Oklahoma history. Oklahoma history right now is possibly the most boring subject you can take in a public school in Oklahoma.
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. That's a really good
Tell
idea.
the stories of our native people, or the federal marshals, or the cowboys, or don't do an Oklahoma musical. Although there's nothing wrong with that. Oh, that sounded wrong, didn't it?
No, that's really funny. But yeah, I think that would just make history so accessible.
Yeah, it would. There was I remember when I was a kid, this was even when I was like preschool and stuff. There was a book and it was you could get it in all the Texaco stations around the country, called Texas History Movies, and it was these very little simple stories. Do you remember them?
I think I do.
They were very, very simple, but they told Oklahoma. I mean, well, some Oklahoma, but mostly Texas history. In a kind of a comic book style, and anybody could read them. And just told stories of what happened. It made it interesting. Gave dialogue to the characters that were there.
Right.
It was racist as it could be. I mean, but it was a good storytelling medium. It was entertaining,
The medium has
informative.
potential. How do you balance your teaching and your artwork or work on your graphic novels at this point? Do you have like a daily or a weekly creative routine?
I teach in the daytime, and then I come home and unwind and go up to my studio and try to work on it.
Do you try to work each night?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, I keep getting caught up in, like I just finished illustrating a coffee table book. I did 80 illustrations for a book about the cattle trails from Texas to Montana, and the author had worked on this thing for about 18 years. I did all the illustrations.
Who's
for
the
it.
publisher?
Skip that
But
question.
that can be a good source of income, can it?
Yeah, I can.
Illustrations.
Yeah, that was and I'm doing some other things too. I'm working on a Little People diorama in one of the casinos, and I'm also illustrating a couple of children's books for other clients.
Great.
But every chance I get, I'm working on my graphic novels. That's my aim. That's what I want to do. And as soon as I can quit teaching, I'm going to do that a lot more.
Looking back on your career, what was one of the pivotal sort of moments that might have been sort of a fork in the road moment, do you think?
I haven't recognized any forks if they've happened. It's
It's all felt like it was supposed to be.
uh,
You were supposed to go that way.
no, it didn't. It didn't feel like that either. It was just if I can see life as a road or a trail, it just kind of meanders, and I feel like I'm guiding myself a little bit, but it's probably all an illusion. I don't know. I don't know what's happening to me. A friend calls and says, why don't you move to this town, or I meet somebody who gets me off on a different tangent, and after that. But I'm on this comic book tangent, this graphic novel thing for the rest of my life. I'm going to do this. This is the thing that people are going to remember me for, is my Oklahoma stories that I've left.
Yeah, I think they're very strong. What was one of the highlights of
But I don't plan to leave anytime soon.
Right. So just up to this point, I guess, what has been one of the highlights?
My time at the Cherokee Nation, when I moved over there from Tulsa, it was the first time I really was ever in a community outside of Loco. I was in one in college for a while, and I was in Tulsa for a while, but when I moved to Tahlequah, it was like I was it was almost like I had come home in some way.
Does Lisa have family down there too?
No, her family's up in Osage County.
I see.
And this is the time I spent over there. I was able to do some. There was a writer over there that I became friends with. His name was Robert Conley, and he actually wrote some comic strips that I did for the Cherokee newspaper while I was working over there. Eventually, though, they got to be too abrasive and far out, so the newspaper wouldn't run them anymore.
Censored again.
Yeah. And he was doing contemporary stories of Cherokees, which strangely enough, Indians generally, I found, and make what you want of this, don't like to be portrayed in comic books. You know what I'm saying? Because because of the stigma that comic books have.
There's that long
Right,
and that history of cartoons and
and comic books are still just they're not serious. They're for kids and stereotypes and all that. I've done a couple of underground Indian comics that some Indians liked them, and some of them burned them probably.
You might be able to turn that around. What has been one of the low points, do you think, for you?
Low points, gee. I lost my job here in Morris for a while, for about 3 years actually, because of federal funding.
That's a big chunk of time.
Yeah, and Lisa and I had bought a place already at this time, and we thought we were going to lose it, and it got very thin. We scrimped and did anything we could. I drove trucks for hay haulers and just anything I could do for a while. That was, and we had a little girl at the time, so sadly she kind of grew up poor. We've recovered since then, but
yeah.
And all the other stresses that come with that,
Right.
Personal relationships.
Right. Well, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to cover, or anything we should have mentioned? We didn't?
I don't know, you want me to tell a story?
I actually do want you to tell stories about a couple of your paintings.
I always put my titles on the back.
Okay. What's it called?
This one is called Pepsi Cola Cowboy. It's one of a series I did using logos, Americana logos, kind of putting them in a Southwest regional type of look. Because that's one of the things I remember as a kid, you couldn't go into any store, gas station, anything without seeing Coca-Cola and or Pepsi-Cola and several other different drinks. And they were just part of the landscape everywhere. They were painted on walls everywhere. My father was a sign painter, and he did a lot of that kind of stuff. So I saw it being created, and then I looked at it for years and years afterwards. And it's still there, that whole landscape. It's kind of a small town look, and it's slowly fading. It's falling apart, and the buildings are being demolished, and we have different logos now. But these are the ones that stick with me, and they're just, you can call it commercialism if you want to, but it's just part of what made America what America is.
And Western Oklahoma, what it is.
Yeah, when I was a kid, it was really not uncommon at all for people to, ride their horses into town. Kids would ride horses, to go see their friends, and at rodeos especially, you'd see people dressed up like this guy. You still do see people, but in those days it was it was less of a weekend activity, and it was more of just general part of life to live that way.
Okay, and what do we have here?
This is an illustration from a children's book that I was going to do. It was never published. It's a painting. I did a series of paintings for all the illustrations. And this was a story called Brown Boy and Freckles.
I love that.
It was their cross-country adventure one summer time, and the adventures they encountered.
Being chased by a bull.
They went through the wrong pasture. They weren't supposed to go through that pasture, and there was a bad bull in there. I gave the painting to my grandson because he really liked it. And,
is it still his painting?
it's still his painting, yes. He's kind of outgrown it now. He's in college, so.
He'll be coming back to it.
Yeah.
I guess this one basically has the title on the
bottom. This was a piece I did as an invitation piece for a show called, obviously, Cowboy Song. It was put on by a fellow named Austin Realrider in Pawnee several years ago. Austin had a gallery, and he was also organizing some Wild West shows that were going on at the time. And he wanted to have the whole show to have real cowboy and Indian flavor. So all he gave me was the title and told me to do a picture to go with it.
Now, Wild West shows, you mean sort of performances,
right?
Sort of outdoor.
Austin lived right there near where Pawnee Bill had a Wild West show for years back at the turn of the century, and for a few years Austin was promoting some of those shows, newer shows that were kind of reproductions of Pawnee Bill, Buffalo Bill, that kind of thing.
Right. Cool. But run by Indians this time, or run by Austin anyway.
Yes.
Now this is one of your illustrations, and I'd like you to tell us what book it's from, etc., but then also maybe talk to us a bit about the process that you use, which is a little different from most graphic illustrators.
This is a work in progress. The working title of this one is Medicine Lodge, and it's the story of Jesse Chisholm.
Okay.
This is my next graphic novel, and tells the story about this real person. Because I've never had any real training as a graphic novelist, or I'm kind of making up the process as I go along. I draw the drawings approximately 3 times as large as they're going to appear in the book itself. They're reduced, and so far all I've done is black and white. That's the medium I like to work in, and I may go to some color later on, but this is what I want to do. They're fun to draw. I like the spontaneity of it. I can just let's sit down with a pencil and start drawing and sketching things out, and then as soon as I get it more or less looking like I want it to, I take a black pen, and start inking it.
I wonder if you can, I'm going to go ahead and try to zoom in a little bit more on the words here, but you probably know can you read that to us? Season in, season out. To track a critter is to know him, I got it, stepping in his very footprints.
Some of my pages are not actually dialogue, so I use a sort of a hybrid poetry as a narrative for some of the places where people are not talking. I want the characters to express themselves in dialogue, but there are certain events and time periods that can be better expressed, just with a kind of a flowing narrative that goes more or less with the picture.
Right, and
the picture and the word should show two sides of the same narrative going. That's what I'm trying to do.
Give two different sets of information,
right.
Sort of.
Yes.
Cool.
I think that was probably a lot of that was influenced by Lance Henson, who's the poet that I've talked about. I really liked his poetry. And Lance and I are probably going to collaborate on some things. I've done some illustrations for his books of poetry before, and those were black and white things also. In fact, my first published work was with Lance. I did some illustrations in a college publication back at Oklahoma College of Liberal Arts in Chickasha.
Wow. Do graphic novels require a lot of research?
They do.
And you've said that the kind of research you like to do is sort of on site.
Yes, I need to go to the places where all these things take place if I possibly can, if I know where they are. And I want to find out what kind of clothes did they wear, what kind of houses did they live in. So many of the westerns that we grew up with as children were so just completely, totally inaccurate and unreal that people have a skewed idea of the way people live. And I want to show the harshness of it, the dirtiness of it. Nobody, you don't hear in the movies, or it's never really referred to, about if you were lucky if you got to take a bath once a month, probably. And you know that anywhere there were a lot of horses, there was a lot of horse shit everywhere. And I want to try to convey that in my novels a little bit, the grittiness of it.